everybody, Ann Sherling here. Did you know that desire without expectation is nothing more than wishful thinking? Well, that's what Bob Proctor says in his book, You Were Born Rich. I've read the book before, actually a couple times, and I kind of keep going back to it because it's such a good book. And I wanted to read a little bit out of chapter 5, where he talks about expect abundance. And it's all about expectation. And I think it's really important because a lot of people go through life not truly expecting the things that they really desire. They wish for them, they hope for them, but they don't expect them. And so I think the things that Bob has in the book here that he can share some wisdom with us is very important, and I wanted to share this with you. So I'm just going to read a little bit out of chapter 5, and I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read it. So he starts sharing here a story of Pat and John, who are his good friends. As I was writing these lines, I received a telephone call from a beautiful couple, Pat and John, whom I would definitely number among my close friends. They called me to tell me they were moving into their new home the following Tuesday, and I was elated to hear the delightful news. You see, less than 2 months earlier, I spent approximately 5 hours talking with them about the image-making concept and the awesome power of expectant attitude. During the course of the conversation, I asked John what he wanted more than anything in the world, and after a long period of silence, he looked at me squarely in the eye and said, "I would like Pat, Tony, and me to be in the house of our dreams by Christmas, and I would like my son to spend Christmas Day with us." I then asked him why he didn't go out and just make his dream a reality. He replied he couldn't because he lacked the money to do so. I then had the audacity to remind John that all things are possible for those who believe, and I know you've heard that before. And therefore, he definitely could have his dream come true. Perhaps he just didn't know how to go about doing it. The three of us then spent about an hour discussing the kind of house they wanted until they had a very clear image of what their dream house looked like, and it was etched upon the screens of their mind. We talked about expectation, and I explained to them that many good things would begin to happen for them that the instant that they began to expect the house for Christmas. Sure enough, the first thing that happened to them once the new attitude permeated their consciousness was that both their minds moved over to the how-to side of the ledger. New ideas began to flow like water, and questions came forth in rapid succession. How much would a house like this cost? How much would they have to put down? Where would they find such a house? To get the answers to their questions, they needed the expertise of a real estate agent. And so I suggested John call my friend Natalie Kottman, a lady who I know is a real estate professional, and tell her of his dream about the house. He should ask her what he would need in the way of finances to make his dream or image come to reality. Finally, I told him he would have to get busy focusing all of his conscious attention on earning the amount of money he would need to achieve his goals, and he would have to actually expect to earn the money that was needed and in the allotted time. Surprisingly, it turned out that the amount of money they required was far less than the figure they had previously thought it would be. Moreover, since John and Pat are both commissioned salespeople, their road to achieving the financial goal was not riddled with as many obstacles as the road for many other people. Nevertheless, without going into detail about how many hurdles they did have to overcome, suffice it to say, with Natalie's help, Pat John succeeded. Next Tuesday, they move into their new home. And again, this is a couple who had no means of knowing how they were going to afford the home. They had no money to be able to get that home. And just by with the power of expectation and going through the steps that Bob Proctor suggested, they figured out ways to get the money coming in so they could get their dream home. Next Saturday is Christmas Day, and they're moving into their home. Just before I hung up the receiver, I congratulated them on their new home, and I asked John if his son would be spending Christmas Day with them. Quietly, but with a voice brimming with happiness, he answered, "Yes, he is. And it sure makes a difference when you expect what you want, rather than expecting what you don't want." And a lot of people do that. We expect the worst to happen. We don't expect what we really want, and that we need to start doing that. I just smiled and said, yes, John, it sure does. Many people today live their entire lives on the basis of seeing is believing. That is to say, the only images they get emotionally involved with are the ones they can discern with their physical senses. But the individuals of real vision down through the ages have known through their overriding principle is what you see is what you get. Expressed somewhat differently, what this means is that the images in people's mind actually precede the concrete images which pervade our material world. Therefore, you should be aware of the fact that the fascinating physical world we see before us, with all of its conveniences for making our lives more comfortable, have been built largely by image makers, men and women of vision, who knew what they could do and expected everything else to fall into place, regardless of what their critics might say to the contrary. For example, two young mechanics from Ohio introduced us to an entirely new kingdom by building and holding an image of an airplane in flight. But had they not expected it to succeed, they would surely have quit the first time they met with defeat. Since they did not, we are now only hours away from anywhere in the world. In fact, we could even reach other planets within a very short span of time. Edison built and held an image which illuminated the entire world, and as a result, we no longer need to spend half of our days groping around in the darkness. You should realize that you too can change your world, just as John and Pat did, by building an image in your mind of exactly the way you would like it to be. But always remember, you only receive what you truly expect, not what you only wish for. And Bob goes on to say, in closing, there are 3 certain steps for achieving prosperity in all of our lives. Number 1, build the image in your mind. Number 2, turn it over to Spirit. Let go and let God. And number 3, expect with all your heart, your soul, and your spirit that the Spirit will reward you openly for your faith. Expect abundance. And so I think that is a really great chapter to read and reread about expecting abundance and living with an attitude of expectation. So maybe it's something that you can start trying if you haven't already done so. Truly believe that what you want, you're going to get. Expect it. Write down a plan of action and the steps that you need to take in order to get the money to come to you will start coming into your life.